All right, so thank you everybody for taking the time to fill out the question, watch the initial art therapy video. So we're back with my wife, Jana Vanderband. So she is a professional art therapist, and a lot of you came up with really good questions from watching that first video. So we took some time and wrote down everybody's questions. We grouped some of them together, but we made sure that everybody's questions got answered. So the first thing, and I think this is probably one of the most important things. So people wanted to know why Jana became an art therapist. So what was the motivation behind becoming an art therapist?
Yeah. So I always liked art. I was always creating, doing something at home. I took all the art classes that I could take in high school. I literally think I took all of them. We didn't have a whole lot, but I took all the ones that I could take. And I was also in marching band, and I did color guard, so the people with the flags. And art just always felt like a really safe place for me. It was a place that I could communicate what I was feeling when I didn't always feel like I could do that verbally. Like, words are really hard for me sometimes, like to come up with exactly what I'm feeling. But art felt like a safe place that I could talk about me and be me. I also really had this feeling that I wanted to help people, but I didn't want to be an art teacher because I felt like that was really cliche. Not that art teaching is bad. I married an art teacher. But I just didn't feel like that was the path for me. And so I was reading this magazine, and they did like features on professions, or like jobs. And there was this article on being an art therapist, and this woman did art therapy with kids in Cambodia, which is a country in Asia. And I was like, that's it. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to help people, and I want to use art, and that sounds perfect. So from that point on, I knew that I wanted to be an art therapist.
So, and once you graduated high school, so you went to Byron Center High School, so from the Grand Rapids area. So what did you have to do to become an art therapist? So once you knew that was what you wanted to do.
Yeah. So I did a lot of research. I'm a weirdo and I like to research things, but
That's not weird.
it's actually a really good skill to have. So
Yes.
learn to research things.
Yes.
So after high school, since I knew I wanted to do art therapy, which I'm kind of also weird in that I knew what I wanted to do. So, going into college, you don't have to know what you want to do, but I did. So I had to get my bachelor's degree. So that is just your basic college degree. It usually takes 4 years to get. And I knew that I needed to have classes in both art and psychology. There's a certain number of credits you have to have for each in order to go on and get your graduate degree, which is what you then have to do after you complete your bachelor's degree. So I have a bachelor's degree in two-dimensional art with a minor in psychology. After I completed that, I went and I got my graduate degree, or my master's, in art therapy. So you have to go to a specific program for art therapy. Mine was art therapy with a concentration in counseling at Mount Mary University, and that's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There's colleges all over the country that offer art therapy degrees. Wayne State University offers a degree and they are in Detroit. I just felt like Mount Mary was a better fit for me. So that is another 3 to 4-ish years of schooling, and that includes you learn about psychology, and you learn how to use art in therapy groups and with individuals. And then you also have to do a pretty big internship. So that's when you actually go to a job site and you work with experienced art therapists and learn from them in the field. So it's like 700 hours that you have to have. And it sounds like a lot, but if it's something that you really feel passionate about, like you need to make sure that you have the experience to be able to help people safely. And that's one of the ways that you do that, is to get the appropriate schooling. And I know someone asked about whether or not all therapists can use art therapy, and what clients you choose to do that with, or patients. And therapists can use art in their therapy sessions, but only art therapists can call it art therapy, which might sound really silly, but as a therapist or an art therapist, you do specific schooling to be able to help people and make sure that you're doing that safely and that you don't harm somebody. Because it can be really hard to do therapy, and some really deep or difficult things can come up. And so if you're not trained correctly, then you might not know how to help that person, and it could actually do more harm than good. So only art therapists can call what they do art therapy. But that doesn't mean that like counselors and therapists and social workers don't use art. It's kind of a weird distinction and a little confusing, but yeah, just like art teachers, they go to school to teach specifically art. And you wouldn't expect your math teacher to be able to come in and do the same thing as Mr. Vanderbrand. Maybe they could. I don't know. I don't think so. I think he's got some pretty cool skills. That would be very different than a math teacher. And he probably couldn't teach you like calculus. So, the same thing with teachers. It's just different.
So, so you go to school, get the the degree, do the hours, specialize in art therapy. But then once you have a job, who do you work with? Who?
Yeah. So any person can benefit, I think, from art therapy. A lot of people think that art therapists just work with kids, but art therapy can be beneficial for kids, for teenagers, for adults, for the elderly. Art therapists work with cancer patients. They work with moms after they've given birth, because sometimes that can be a really hard thing. They can work with kids in foster care, kids who've been adopted, people who struggle with addictions, like alcohol addiction or using drugs. That's one of the populations that I work with. And I really think anybody can benefit. People who just are looking to better themselves. Like, I feel like I could use someone to really push me, because I feel like I could be a better person.
Yeah. And I think that was mentioned in the video. That's one of the things that was specifically mentioned in the video that everybody watched before they asked their questions. So, so how does art therapy help with mental health? So mental health was a big focus of that video. So there was a lot of people who were asking about the benefits of art therapy for mental health and your brain.
Yeah, which is a really, really good question. People are doing a lot of research on this. So we're just starting to realize that art has some awesome benefits for our health other than just making us feel good. But number one, I have experienced, and I think you guys probably have too, that sometimes we just can't say things in words of what we're feeling. You might know that something's not right, or that something doesn't feel right, or something, but to put that in words is just really hard. So art allows us a nonverbal, or a way without speaking, that we can communicate how we are feeling and start to work through that. And so making art also stimulates different parts of our brain, other than parts of the brain that might be stimulated or light up when we're just talking. So when all of those different parts of our brain are working together to create art, it helps us to integrate or express difficult experiences and help us feel less stuck in them. It's almost like a clogged drain. And once we start to be able to express that and to understand what is clogging our drain, then that clog can start to move through, and it makes us feel a little bit better. So, yeah.
So working through, so art therapy is focused on helping people work through different experiences, things like that. Will it bring up big feelings? Like, is it easier or harder than other therapies? Like, is there an emotion that's brought up from doing art therapy?
Mm-hmm. So if therapy is done right, any kind of therapy, it's going to be hard. And it's not always, I hope that people have fun in my art therapy sessions and that they're able to enjoy aspects of making art. But therapy isn't just about sitting and making fun art. It's also about making a change for ourselves. And so change is really hard. And that's why you do it with another person, your therapist. They're there to support you and to really, kind of create this really safe space for you to change. And so, because of that, I just lost my train of thought. But
It's okay, it'll come back.
it's gonna come back.
You'll find it. Yeah.
It flew away like a bird. But because we are making a really hard change, sometimes big feelings come up. And so when you're looking, when you're in therapy, you want to feel safe, and your therapist can help you work through that. But that usually does happen. Mm-hmm.
So when you're working, so if a client went to an art therapist and they're working in that specialized therapy, so what kind of art would they be making? Like, what kind of stuff do they do?
Mm-hmm. It depends totally on you, or the client or the patient, and the therapist. So ultimately, therapy is about the patient, what the patient needs or what the client needs, and what they are looking to gain from therapy. Mm-hmm. So everything is really specialized to that client, and sometimes the therapist has preferences and they bring that into therapy. Like, I really enjoy painting, but using found objects too in my paintings. So like yarn and paper and pieces of magazine and kind of layering and painting on top of that. And so that's something that I naturally kind of go to in therapy with people. But people use clay in therapy. They use yarn and weaving, sculpture, painting, drawing. I've used spray paint before in one of my therapy sessions.
Sorry about that. That
Technical
was
difficulties.
yes.
That was our dog.
That was our dog. So this is Bella. There. Welcome to our home.
Oh, she's doing strange things.
There you go. Okay, you're still here. Well, welcome back. Yes.
Yeah. So really, any type of art is fair game. Some therapists use like graphic design and like computer programs to do art. Some people do videos, dance, all sorts of stuff. So
Yes, great questions. So we've got just a couple more questions. So this is a fantastic question. So Juan, thank you for asking this question. So in that video, so they mentioned metaphors seen through art. So, metaphor, being, like a, connection, creating some sort of, imagery or idea, connected to art. And I'm curious, so, Juan's curious, and I'm sure other people are as well. So what metaphors, are they talking about, and how to interpret them in a huge varying selection of pieces that were made by patients. So, basically seeing, a whole variety of different, selections and pieces. Sorry, getting my dog out of the way. Okay. So I'll let you take over and answer that question.
Yeah. So a lot of times people think that art therapists look at people's drawings and then interpret them. And some people used to do that, but that's not so much the thinking anymore. And a lot of times, one of the coolest things that you get to do in art therapy is create paintings that do represent something that is happening in your life. You might not even know it at the time, and then you paint this thing and you're like, wow, I didn't know that's what I was struggling with, but this flower totally represents that, or something like that. And so it's really up to the patient or the client to interpret their own art. So myself as the therapist, I'm there as a guide to kind of point things out and say, hey, I noticed this, or you spent a lot of time drawing this part, but you kind of skimmed through this part. Or wow, there's a lot of color over here. It's black and white here. What does that mean? What do you think? So really just kind of trying to help the client understand and interpret their own drawing. There's not like a prescription or like a key. Like if someone draws a person without arms, then they are feeling depressed or sad, or if a person is drawing themselves all alone on a sheet of paper, then they must feel lonely. Nothing like that. So that would not be true for every single person's drawing. And really it's just up to the person and the context of their lives and what they're feeling at the time. And sometimes it changes. Like you might look at a painting 10 days down the road and say, wow, there's a totally different meaning now that I look at that. So it's really up to the client or the patient in therapy to interpret their own stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think this next question kind of ties into that a little bit, and so Benny asked a really good question. So he said, how or why have humans always had a thing for art? So why has there been like this interest or this draw for art, and how does that connect to art therapy?
Mm-hmm. I personally think that every single person was created to be creative. Even if we aren't necessarily drawn to painting or what we think of as traditional arts like ceramics or sculpture, or we create other things. We create meals, we create jokes, we create basketball plays, or we create other people. Sorry, I went there. And so every single person in some way is creative. And we see that throughout our history as people. So really early on, people did cave drawings, like the little people with spears, chasing bison. I don't know if that's historically accurate, but cave paintings.
Yes.
And through all the hard times, like the Great Depression, there were photographers taking pictures. And we've just documented our lives and our stories in art. So it just makes sense that in some ways that when something really hard happens to us, or we're feeling really difficult feelings, that we could turn to art and say, okay, this is what's happening in my story right now. How can I understand my story through art, and how can I help imagine a new story for myself, or improve my story, or however, find myself a little bit better, understand myself and my story a little bit better by using art. So it's kind of a way of reimagining the world and then literally creating a new world for yourself. I kind of believe there's always that possibility of recreating and making something new out of what's here and what's in us.
So, so this is a ton of awesome information. So what is so this is the last question. So what is your favorite part of being an art therapist?
Yeah. My favorite part of being an art therapist, I think, is actually two things. One is that I get to do something that I really love. There's our dog again. Something that I really love with other people. I love art, and I feel safe, and I get to share that safe place with other people. And I really hope they feel safe with me. I also really enjoy watching people realize their own value and how special they are when they use art. We all have something that makes us special and valuable, and sometimes we just need to be reminded of that. And art has a really special way of doing that. And so it just always warms my heart when someone has that light bulb moment of wow, I have something to bring to the world, and I'm gonna do that. So yeah, that's kind of why I do art therapy and what I love about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you guys for asking awesome questions. So hopefully in the future, when we're back in the classroom again, then you'll get to meet Jana in person. So I'd love to have her come into our art classes. So take more art classes. So yeah, so that way, someday you can see, you can meet Jana in person and be able to learn a little bit more about the profession of art therapy that way. So also make sure to check out this week. There is, sorry, I have dog toy. So there is an optional art activity that ties in with art therapy. Again, so thinking about art therapy, this is by no means a professional therapy session. This is just learning about what Jana does for a profession. So there is an art activity that you can do that Jana talks a little bit about in another video. So make sure to check that out. I encourage you to give it a try. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask.